Our final guest for today is Ernst Van Biljon, former prosecutor.
Correct.
Now a major focus on occupational health and safety. And obviously, based on your presentation, there may be some things that you'd be able to tell us about the amendment bill that we're all waiting for. So I've prepared a few questions for you in this regard, if you don't mind.
Certainly, anytime.
So first off, in your presentation, you mentioned that the most dangerous hazard in the workplace is the person themselves. And why would you say so? And how do we control this?
That is the problem. How do you control the human? And that's why the human is such a dynamic. You can't call it a machine that always does the same thing.
Yeah, because it sounds like a paradox, right? So we say control behavior, but we've got freedom of choice.
Correct.
So how do you
You don't
mitigate
know
the two?
what is the state of mind of that employee. The normal thing, and I speak a lot to management about this, where I say, what is the recipe for you to make sure that the people will go home? And in the first place, they don't know their employees. Because I always ask them, if an employee reports with red eyes and slurred speech, and what do you think? And everybody will always say, no, he's bubbleized or he's intoxicated or what. And then I said, but you didn't know that he was actually at hospital till 3 o'clock this morning and he still came to work.
Oh, his baby kept him awake all night.
His wife went into labor. You didn't even know she was going into labor. Did you even know she was pregnant? And that is the problem. How do you manage that person if it's not an active decision from management to get involved? That is the big challenge with, because you can expect anything from the human. The human, you know what, you can provide the healthiest and safest work environment in the world. You can have the best systems in the world, but you put the human there and anything can happen. That's the problem.
Well, I mean, my mother always said, where there's people, there's problems.
Yes,
So
that's very
I think
true.
it just seconds what you're saying.
That's very true.
If we take the bill that we're waiting for,
Yeah.
that we're waiting for promulgation, and the interview that I had this morning, I was informed that it's 99.9% complete, which for me is good news, because I think a lot of health and safety professionals are waiting for it to be promulgated. If we consider that, how will this help with the control of behavior or unsafe acts in the workplace? If we compare it against the current legislation, and I know that the new bill isn't finalized yet, but from what we know about it, how will it aid the employer to...
It is very clear that it's going to be more structured. It is more about policy and procedures where, I can tell you now, unfortunately, in many of the fatalities that I investigated in the last few months, my prosecutor blood still boils very strong. Because in no uncertain terms do I tell the people, but you killed this person. So in terms of the law as such, it's easy to say you've got to provide a healthy and a safe work environment. You've got to do a risk assessment. You've got to give an SOP. It's very easy to do that. But now I've also seen the standard of the documents. And now in terms of the new bill, it is going to standardize it according to a standard. You can call it the ISO standard. There are all these rules involved. You've got to comply to policy procedures. You've got to monitor. It will just make management more involved than currently. So we hope for the best. Any standard that is higher is better.
No, of course, I agree. One of the most interesting things for me that come from the bill is that they make mention that a risk assessment needs to be done by a competent person.
Correct, yes.
Determined by who? And measured how?
Well, there is a definition for a competent person in the law, not necessarily in the new law. Now, that might be a problem.
Okay.
Because it's all about training, experience, qualifications. If there's a unit standard involved, did the training that the guy went through, was that in alignment with that? So there are so many variables, but you will have to prove that it's not just Pete, one of our supervisors who did the risk assessment. And sadly to say, in the 17 people who died in the last few months that I investigated, many of these risk assessments were done by a single person.
Who's probably not qualified,
Not at all.
not competent,
Not at
has
all.
no experience,
Not at all.
probably drafted some sort of template from a spreadsheet.
You know what? And it's so sad to see that some of these documents, it's window dressing. What happens in that risk assessment is not necessarily what's happening on the floor. So it's sad. We're losing the plot. And that's why I hope and pray that with a new OSH bill, that there will be more energy, more alignment,
Right,
more involvement.
right.
Yeah.
The focus and emphasis on the application and evidence of maintenance of a health and safety management system in, I believe it's now Section 7 and Section 8 that
Correct.
the new bill mentions.
Correct.
What can you tell us about that? Why the shift from just doing a risk assessment
Yeah.
the way it is now, according to what the Act is asking? I think it's Section 82D. I might be mistaken.
Section 8(2)(d) says
Oh,
the
okay.
employer shall establish what hazards are attached to any work.
There we go. There we go. And now in the new legislation, there's this move and this shift towards a health
Yeah.
and safety management system.
And you've got to prepare a risk management plan.
Right.
Now, you've got to remember, a risk is the result of a hazard. Like, for example, if you work at heights, you can fall. That's the risk. And now for every activity in a workplace where a person can fall, you will have to prove how do you manage that. So, and then if you look at the bill, it also includes hazards. So when you look at the bill, you can see the intention is there just to raise the bar, just to get more involvement and to dig deeper. So I know a lot of people are very negative about the bill. I'm actually very positive.
And I'm also very optimistic.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I'm very optimistic about, especially if we consider the mention of risk, hazard, the risk assessment competence that's attached to that, the mention of health and safety management system, is the mention of control.
Correct.
That no work can be done unless the necessary controls have been implemented according to such plan, that risk
correct.
management plan.
Correct.
Which, again, goes back to the quality of the risk assessment. And that excites me.
Exactly. Because you've got a superficial type of risk assessment. How do you control it? And
Exactly.
the controls that you put in place is going to be, what, 10% of the actual problem that you've got.
Right.
So I'm really excited. And I'm happy with the fines because for too many years, it was just a slap on the wrist.
That's my next question. So what can we expect in terms of the escalation, in terms of consequences from the current Act as it stands towards the new bill?
Well, you know what? It's very clear that the non-compliance in terms of the current legislation, the maximum is a fine of 50,000 rand for 1 year. Now, for big organizations, what is 50,000?
Pocket change.
Exactly. Is 5 million better? They can still pay that. But connected to that, the danger of going to jail for 5 years, I hope that is going to be more in alignment. So basically what they also try to do is to bring the new OSH bill in alignment with the Mines Health and Safety Act. Because there was always this difference. Mine Health and Safety Act, the penalties are in the millions, but the OSH Act was always 50,000. So it's about time that
I
they had
believe
to
so as
review
well.
this, for sure.
Right. What are your thoughts on the administrative fines that can be imposed?
I'm very worried
Why?
because now the Department of Employment and Labour will become like a traffic officer.
Sure.
He's going to get in there with a ticket book,
May show up unannounced.
unannounced. And if they see contraventions, what excites me is it says if they see any person contravening something. So that can even be a visitor at a company or a contractor not doing the right thing. But I'm just very concerned on, I know there was a section in that, the first amendment bill that I saw, no employer is allowed to bribe an inspector.
I see where you're going. Yeah.
I'm very concerned.
Yeah. No, I suppose there is an opportunity for fraud or
Yeah.
people to try and buy their way out of it.
Correct.
But naturally, I mean, you mentioned a traffic officer. Any fine that's offered or imposed can be challenged.
Correct.
So there's still an opportunity for the employer or the employee or the person to go to court to say, look,
Correct.
I don't feel that this is reasonable.
This is just actually or speeding up the process. If a person is being prosecuted, he can pay admission of guilt, and that's done and dusted. So again, I can see where it comes from, because the current position is it takes years before a matter can actually go to court.
Right.
Because the Department of Employment and Labour will investigate, then they prepare a confidential summary. That goes to the superior of the inspector, that goes up to the chief inspector, then it goes to the Attorney General, or there used to be the Attorney General, the Director of Public Prosecutions today. And
It's
I
a long
tell you now,
process, yeah.
exactly. And now that docket lands up on the table of the prosecutor, and the prosecutor hasn't got a cooking clue what this legislation is all about. And we've seen it where prosecutors, they look for any excuse in the world to withdraw those charges.
Right.
Because they haven't got the knowledge. They feel, there's an advocate storming into their offices and say, we've got a risk assessment and we did this. That prosecutor doesn't know what we're talking about.
Yes.
That's why I can't wait to get involved in another prosecution. I really want to.
My last question, it's actually just as a matter of interest. So if an administrative fine is provided or given or issued, I suppose is the right word, and there's an admission of guilt that the person signs, the employer signs it, or the manager, whoever the case may be, does that go on to record for them having a criminal record now?
Administrative fine, no, because that is seen as a admission of guilt.
Even if it's an employer responsibility to make sure that, and the employer representative is a 16.1.
Correct. Remember, you get a criminal record once you're convicted in court.
Right.
And they take your fingerprints.
Oh, I see.
Then we've got you on the SAKB, and then you've got a criminal record. But now in this particular case, you will get a summons, a ticket. And you can go and you can pay the ticket.
I see.
It is still uncertain who are you going to pay the money to. Can you go to the police station and go and pay it there? That is the one uncertainty at this point in time. But we've got to look at the administration laws in terms of that.
Right.
But the Department of Employment and Labour introduced a prosecution register a while ago, where it's almost like a name and shame on their website. They say who was prosecuted, what was the offence, what was the outcome. So it's almost like a name and shame.
Okay.
And you can imagine a company appearing in that prosecution register. Their share price can be affected by that. So there's a ripple effect to all of this.
Right. Well, I'm looking forward to the new promulgation.
So do I.
And I believe it's going to bring a lot of positive change to health and safety in general in the country. I think even the effect that it's going to have on households, and that every individual that owns a house that employs someone to iron their shirts or dig a hole or build a lapa needs to take accountability. I think it's about time that people wake up to that as well.
Correct.
So I'm really excited. Thank you for your time.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you very much for the invite.
Enjoy the rest of the function, and
Thank you.
We'll see you again soon.